Chapter 1, coming about, Mike Horner didn't look back when he stepped off the ship for the last time. Not because he didn't want to, because he knew if he did, he might hesitate. And hesitation had never been part of his operating procedure. 24 years in the United States Navy had taught him that much. The paperwork felt heavier than it should have as he tucked it into his sea bags. Retirement. The word had weight to it, even if the ceremony hadn't. No band, no speeches, just a handshake, a few nods, and a quiet understanding between men who'd spent their lives pretending things weren't as hard as they were. "Take it easy, Chief," someone had said. Mike had given a small nod. "Ain't my style." He walked down the pier without turning his head. The ship sat behind him, gray and steady, like it had always been, like it always would be. That part of his life was done. A week later, Mike found himself standing outside the VFW, staring at the familiar building like it might give him instructions. "Didn't. Hell with it," he muttered, pushing the door open. The smell hit him first: beer, old wood, and something fried. Comfortable, predictable, the kind of scent that didn't ask questions. "Holy hell," a voice boomed from behind the bar. "That you, Horner?" Mike looked up and broke into a rare grin. "Evening, Cookie." The retired Master Chief grinned back, wiping his hands on a towel. "You got older. And you got shorter," Mike shot back, dropping his bag near the wall. "Watch your mouth, Chief. I can still outcook you and outrank you in insults." Mike chuckled, pulling up a stool. "That ain't a high bar." Cookie leaned in. "Word got around your back for good." "Yeah," Mike said simply. "Figured it was time." Cookie gave him a look, one that held understanding without prying. "Beer. Wouldn't be right if you didn't ask." The glass hit the bar with a satisfying thud. Mike took a long drink, letting the cold settle something inside him he hadn't realized was off. "Folks gonna be glad to see you," Cookie added. "You picked a good night." Mike raised an eyebrow. "That so?" Cookie smirked. "Retirement party. Yours." Mike blinked once. "I didn't." Yeah, you didn't want to fuss," Cookie said, waving him off. "Too bad. We already decided." Mike exhaled slowly. Figures. The place filled up faster than he expected. Faces he remembered, some older, some new. Marines, soldiers, even an Air Force colonel who looked like he'd never smiled a day in his life. "Chief," someone called. Mike turned just in time to get pulled into a handshake that turned into a half-hug. "Good to see you still alive," the Marine said. "Disappointed," Mike replied. "Little bit." The table filled quickly, drinks appearing like magic. At some point, someone made the inevitable jab. "You Navy guys always riding our coattails," the Marine said with a grin. "Marines are the men's department of the Navy." Mike didn't even look up from his drink. What do they call Marines without the Navy? The table went quiet for half a second. Then Mike smirked. "The Army." The explosion of laughter nearly shook the table. Even the Marine slapped the surface, shaking his head. "Damn it, Chief. Facts are facts," Mike said, completely unapologetic. Even the Air Force colonel gave a rare chuckle. For a few minutes, the noise washed over him. Laughter, insults, stories that got bigger every time they were told. Felt, right, that something tugged at his attention. Across the room, in the farthest booth from the noise, sat a woman. She wasn't part of it. While everyone else leaned into the chaos, she leaned away from it. Shoulders tight, posture rigid, like she was bracing for something no one else could see. Her right leg stretched out slightly in front of her. The prosthetic wasn't hidden, but it wasn't displayed either. Just there. Matter of fact. Mike studied her for a moment longer than necessary. She didn't look angry. She looked lost. "That one's new," Mike said quietly, nodding toward her. Cookie followed his gaze. "Amy Brown. Don't think I've met her." "You haven't," Cookie said. "Army. Logistics. Staff sergeant." Mike kept watching. "What's her story?" Cookie hesitated just long enough. "Convoy got hit. AD," he said, voice losing its humor. "Took her leg below the knee. Forced medical retirement." Mike's jaw tightened slightly. "How long's she been coming around?" "Couple months," Cookie said. "Doesn't stay long. Doesn't talk much." Mike nodded slowly. He understood that kind of quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that sat heavy in your chest and didn't let go. "Don't bother her unless you mean it," Cookie added, sharper now. "She doesn't need pity." Mike let out a short breath. "Good thing I ain't got any to spare." Cookie snorted. "That I believe." Mike picked up his beer, considering for a moment. He could stay where he was. Easy. Safe. Stick with the noise. Instead, he stood. "Where you going?" someone called. Mike jerked his thumb toward the other side of the room. "Gonna go make a bad decision." "That's on brand," the Marine shouted after him. Mike ignored it. Amy noticed him before he spoke. Her eyes lifted just slightly, catching his approach. "Evening," Mike said, stopping a respectful distance from the booth. She didn't respond right away, just looked at him, measuring. "Seat taken?" he added. "Depends," she said finally, voice even. "You planning to make this weird?" Mike considered that. Statistically, yes. One corner of her mouth twitched despite herself. Then go ahead, she said, gesturing to the seat. Mike slid in across from her, setting his drink down. Mike Horner, he said, recently unemployed. She glanced at his hands, his posture, his bearing. Navy. Was, he corrected. She nodded once. Amy Brown. I know, he said. That earned him a sharper look. Relax, Mike added. Bartender briefed me, said not to screw it up. And yet here you are, she replied. Like I said, Mike said, taking a sip of his beer. Bad decisions. For a moment, silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just there. You always sit alone? Mike asked. You always ask questions with obvious answers? She shot back. Fair, he said. Figure I'd try anyway. She studied him again, more closely this time. You don't look like you're here to hit on me, she said. I'm not, Mike replied simply. That's a first. I've been called worse. That pulled a quiet huff of amusement from her. Then what do you want, Mike? He leaned back slightly, considering his answer. Honestly, he said. I saw someone who looked like they didn't belong here. Figured I'd come confirm it. Her eyes narrowed. And, he shrugged, still gathering data. For a second, she looked like she might snap at him. Instead, she leaned back in her seat. Well, she said dryly. You're not wrong. Mike nodded once. Good, he said. Hate starting conversations on a lie. Something shifted then, small, almost invisible. Not trust, but maybe the start of it. Outside, the world kept moving. Inside, for the first time in a long while, Mike Horner felt like he might be exactly where he was supposed to be, even if he didn't understand why yet. Chapter 2, Cross Signals. Mike didn't make a big deal about it. That was the key, he figured. If there was one universal truth he'd learned in 24 years, it was that making something a thing almost guaranteed you'd ruin it. So instead of hovering or forcing conversation, he just showed up. 2 days after the retirement party, he walked into the VFW like it was routine. Cookie didn't look impressed. Back already? Mike climbed onto the same stool as before. You miss me. Like a hole in the hull, Cookie said, sliding a beer toward him anyway. You stalking that girl? Mike didn't look over right away. If I was stalking her, I wouldn't ask that loud. Cookie snorted. Fair point. Only then did Mike glance across the room. Same booth, different posture. Amy sat with one leg tucked under the table this time, her prosthetic angled a little closer in. She wasn't staring at the door like last time. Progress, maybe. Not here for her, Mike added, taking a drink. No, Cookie said. No, Mike said evenly. But if she's here, I ain't gonna ignore it. Cookie studied him for a moment, then nodded once. Just don't try to fix her. Mike's mouth twitched. Chief, I spent years fixing weapon systems designed by the lowest bidder. I don't fix people. I barely maintain myself. That explains a lot, Cookie said dryly. Amy noticed him sooner this time. Not right away, but sooner. He didn't go over immediately. That was deliberate. He stayed at the bar, trading insults with the usual crowd, letting the noise settle around him. It wasn't a performance. It was instinct. Let things happen naturally. At one point, the same Marine from the other night slapped him on the shoulder. Hey, Navy, you still riding on our reputation? Or you finally gonna admit Marines carry you? Mike didn't even turn. Son, the only thing Marines carry is crayons. The table erupted again. Original, the Marine shot back. Effective, Mike replied. Even Amy glanced over at that, just briefly. He caught it, filed it away. After a while, he grabbed his beer and stood. Round 2, Cookie asked. Mike gestured toward his bottle. Working on it. He crossed the room without rushing, stopping by her table like he'd just thought of it. Evening, Staff Sergeant, he said. Amy looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. Not annoyed, just curious. You memorized that from a file? Or is that your party trick? She asked. Mike slid into the booth again without waiting to be invited. Respect isn't a trick. She exhaled softly through her nose. You always this direct? Only when I mean something, he said. That lingered for a second. You sit here again, I'm gonna assume you made it out of that data gathering phase, she said. Mike nodded. Preliminary findings indicate you still don't like crowds. Bold analysis. Been known to crack a case or two. She leaned back slightly, folding her arms. So what now? Now? Mike took a drink, then set the bottle down. We awkwardly talk until one of us says something mildly offensive and ruins it. Amy blinked once. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. Not loud, not exaggerated, but real. That might be the most honest approach anyone's taken with me in a while, she said. Mike shrugged. Don't see the point in pretending otherwise. Their conversation didn't flow easily. That might have been the most surprising part. There were pauses, real ones, not the comfortable kind he'd expected. They circled topics instead of diving straight in, testing boundaries without calling it that. So, Amy said at one point, tapping her fingers lightly on the table, you just retired? Couple weeks ago. That explains the haircut. Mike raised an eyebrow. This is grown out, believe it or not. Tragic, she deadpanned. He smirked. Army really set you up for disappointment, didn't they? At least we learned how to stand on our own 2 feet, she said. The words dropped heavier than she probably intended. Her gaze flickered, just briefly, toward her own leg. Mike didn't follow it, didn't acknowledge it, didn't soften his tone either. Yeah, he said. And sometimes you lose one of them. Her eyes snapped back to him. There it was. The line. The test. You always like that? She asked, quieter now. Like what? Blunt enough to piss people off. Mike considered. Only the ones already looking for a reason. That hung between them. Then slowly, Amy leaned back again. Good answer, she said. Later that night, the door opened again. Mike barely noticed until he heard a familiar voice. Dad. That word still hit him like incoming. He turned. Standing just inside the doorway was his daughter, Lauren. 24 now. Taller than he remembered. More sure of herself, too. Behind her stood his son, Jake, hands shoved in his pockets. Hey, Mike said, standing quickly. Didn't know. You guys coming by? Lauren shrugged. Mom mentioned you'd been hanging around here. Thought we'd see you, Jake added, a little more guarded. Mike nodded once, trying not to overthink it. Yeah, good. Good to see you. It was awkward immediately. Not hostile. Just uncertain. Like none of them quite knew the right script. Want a drink? Mike offered, then immediately winced. Soda. Lauren smiled faintly. We're good. Jake glanced toward the bar. This place hasn't changed. No, Mike said. Guess it don't. Amy watched the exchange quietly from the booth. Mike noticed. He hesitated, then gestured slightly. You can sit if you want, he said to his kids. They exchanged a glance. Then Lauren stepped forward. Sure. They slid into the booth. Lauren beside Amy, Jake across from her. For a second, nobody spoke. This is Amy, Mike said finally. She's, He paused. Amy raised an eyebrow. Someone I'm trying not to annoy, he finished. That earned him a snort from Jake. Good luck with that, his son said. Amy smirked slightly. He's not doing great so far. Hey now, Mike protested mildly. Lauren looked between them. You two just met? Couple times, Amy said. That obvious? Mike added. Lauren shrugged. You're different. Mike blinked. Different how? She tilted her head. Less closed off, I guess. That caught him off guard. Before he could answer, Jake leaned forward slightly. So you were Army? He asked Amy. Yeah. What did you do? Logistics, she said. Convoys, supply runs. Jake nodded. Cool. Amy gave him a look. That's not usually the reaction. Jake shrugged. Mom remarried a guy who sells insurance. Logistics sounds way more interesting. That pulled a laugh out of all of them. Unexpected. Easy. Even Mike. And for a brief moment, sitting there in that booth, something shifted again. Not fixed. Not perfect. But connected. Amy noticed it too. The way Mike relaxed. Not completely, but enough. The way his kids leaned into the conversation just a little more with each passing minute. It wasn't smooth, but it wasn't broken either. Later, when Lauren and Jake left, Amy looked at him. You're trying, she said. Mike stared at his bottle. Feels like I'm late to it. Yeah, she said simply. You are. He nodded once. She didn't soften it. Didn't need to. But, she added after a moment, you showed up. Mike glanced at her. She shrugged one shoulder. That's more than most. He let out a slow breath. Yeah, he said. Guess it is. They sat in silence again. Not as awkward this time. Just thoughtful. So, Amy said eventually, you gonna keep making bad decisions and sitting here? Mike smirked slightly. That's the plan. Good, she said. And for the first time since he'd walked back into his hometown, Mike Horner felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely out of place anymore. Chapter 3, Unsteady Ground. By the end of the week, it wasn't unusual anymore. That, more than anything, caught Mike off guard. He had never been a creature of routine outside of necessity. The Navy had given him one, whether he liked it or not, watches, drills, schedules carved in steel. But this was different. This wasn't imposed. This was chosen. And still, every couple of days, he found himself pushing open the VFW door around the same time, nodding to Cookie, grabbing a beer, and eventually drifting toward the back booth, where Amy usually was. Not always, but often enough that it felt like a pattern forming. You're getting predictable, Cookie said one evening, watching him scan the room. Mike shrugged. That bad? Depends, Cookie replied. You ever consider that maybe she doesn't want a routine built around her? Mike leaned against the bar, taking that in. I'm not building anything around her. Cookie raised an eyebrow. Mike exhaled. All right, maybe a little, but I ain't crowding her. Cookie considered that, then nodded. No, you're not. Just don't drift into it without realizing. That's rich, Mike said with a faint smirk. You ever drift into a 24-year career? Yeah, Cookie shot back. Look how that turned out. Mike snorted softly. Fair. He glanced again toward the booth. Amy wasn't there. Something in his chest shifted. Not disappointment exactly, but an awareness. Relax, Cookie said, catching the look. She ain't on your payroll. She'll show. Didn't say she wouldn't, Mike replied. Still, he stayed at the bar longer than usual. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that she walked in. Mike didn't turn right away. He recognized the rhythm of the door, the slight, uneven cadence in her stride. Not pronounced, not hesitant, just different enough to notice if you knew what to listen for. Evening, he said as she approached the bar. She stopped next to him, arching an eyebrow. You developing sonar now? Occupational hazard, Mike said, lifting his beer slightly in greeting. Amy ordered a drink, then leaned against the bar beside him. For a moment they didn't speak. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't effortless either. You didn't take my seat, she said suddenly. Mike glanced toward the booth. Didn't know it belonged to you. It doesn't, she said. You just keep sitting there. Yeah, Mike admitted. Habit, maybe? She studied him again. You're careful, she said. About what? Everything you say, she replied. Everything you don't say. Mike let out a quiet breath. That's one way to read it. It's the right way, she said. He turned slightly toward her, resting an elbow on the bar. Or, he said, I just don't talk unless I've got something worth saying. Amy's expression shifted, just enough to show she was weighing that. Most people fill the silence, she said. Most people are uncomfortable with it, Mike replied. And you're not. He shook his head. Spent a lot of time in it. That landed somewhere deeper than the rest. Amy looked away first. Yeah, she said quietly. Me too. They ended up at the booth again anyway. Not by agreement, just by drift. Amy slid into her usual spot, and Mike followed without comment. You ever think about what you're gonna do now? She asked after a while. Mike leaned back, stretching his shoulders. Every day. And I got no idea, he said simply. She nodded. Same. You got any plans at all? Amy hesitated, then shrugged. They gave me options. Rehab programs, job placement stuff. None of it fits. Mike tilted his head slightly. Why not? Because it's all built around the idea that I need to be handled, she said, frustration edging into her voice. Like I broke and now they're trying to put me back together into something useful. Mike listened without interrupting. I'm not broken, she added, sharper now. I know, he said. She stopped, looked at him. You say that like you mean it. I do mean it. Most people don't. Mike shrugged lightly. Most people don't know what they're looking at. Amy's jaw tightened. And you do. Yeah, he said steady. I do. She searched his expression, looking for something. Pity, maybe, or doubt. She didn't find either. What do you see then? She asked. Mike didn't answer right away. He tilted his bottle slightly, watching the condensation run down the glass. I see someone who got hit, he said finally. Hard. Lost something that matters. And instead of folding, she's still here. Amy's eyes flickered. That's not broken, he added. That's just unfinished business. The words settled in slowly. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she let out a breath she probably hadn't realized she'd been holding. You've got a way of saying things that sounds like an insult until it isn't, she said. Mike smirked faintly. Comes with the uniform. You don't wear one anymore. Don't need to. Over the next hour, the conversation shifted. Less guarded. Not open, not fully, but easier. They traded stories in pieces, never all at once. Amy talked about convoys, long stretches of nothing, punctuated by moments that burned into memory. Mike shared snippets from his time with EOD, from the boat teams, from places neither of them named directly. You ever think about it? Amy asked at one point. Going back. Mike shook his head. No. Just like that. Just like that. She studied him. That easy. No, he said. That simple. There was a difference. She seemed to understand that. I didn't get a choice, she said quietly. Mike nodded once. Yeah, I know. And that's supposed to be fine? She pressed. No, he said immediately. It's not fine. She leaned forward slightly. Then why does everyone act like it is? They don't, Mike said. They just don't know what to do with it. Amy frowned. So they pretend it's okay. Or they try to fix it, Mike replied. Which is worse? Yeah, she muttered. He took another drink, then added, or they avoid it altogether. She glanced at him. You're not doing any of those. No, he said. Why? Mike met her gaze evenly. Because none of that helps. Later that night, the conversation started to unravel. Not in a bad way. Just in a way that exposed the edges. You're doing it again, Amy said suddenly. Mike frowned slightly. Doing what? Being steady, she said. Like it was an accusation. Like nothing rattles you. Mike leaned back, considering. Plenty rattles me, he said. I don't see it. That's because I don't show it. Why not? He tilted his head. Why would I? Amy blinked. Because it's honest. So is keeping it in check, Mike replied. She shook her head. That's control, not honesty. And letting it run wild is what? He asked. Effective. It's real. So is discipline, he countered. The tension crept in, subtle but present. Amy leaned back, folding her arms again. There it is, she said. There what is? The wall. Mike exhaled slowly. Not a wall. Sure looks like one. It's not meant to keep people out, he said. It's meant to keep things level. That sounds like the same thing. It's not, Mike said, firmer now. Amy held his gaze. Then she laughed, but it wasn't light this time. See? She said. You're just like the rest of them. Mike's expression didn't change, but something underneath it tightened. No, he said quietly. I'm not. You are, she insisted. You just package it better. He shook his head once. You're wrong. Am I? Yeah, he said. You just don't trust anything that doesn't look like what you went through. That hit. Amy's expression hardened. That's not fair. It's not supposed to be fair, Mike replied. It's supposed to be honest. For a second, it looked like she might fire back. Instead, she stood. Yeah, she said. I've had enough honesty for tonight. All right, Mike said evenly. She paused, like she expected him to stop her. He didn't. Good night, Mike, she said. Night, Amy. She walked out without looking back. Mike sat there for a long time after, not chasing, not second-guessing, just thinking. Cookie eventually wandered over, setting another beer down in front of him. That went well, the older man said dryly. Mike gave a faint smirk. Could have been worse. Could have been better. Yeah. Cookie nodded toward the door. You gonna go after her? Mike shook his head. No. Why not? He picked up the bottle, staring at it for a moment. Because she didn't leave to be followed, he said. Cookie studied him for a second, then grunted. Smart. Mike took a slow drink. Across the room, the booth sat empty. For the first time since they'd started talking, the silence felt heavier. Not broken, but definitely unsteady. And Mike knew enough to recognize that meant one thing. They weren't done. Chapter 4, Tides Turning. Amy didn't show up the next time Mike went to the VFW. Or the time after that. Mike didn't ask about her right away. That would have felt too close to chasing, and he'd already decided he wasn't going to do that. Still, awareness crept in whether he wanted it to or not. He noticed the empty booth. Not constantly, just enough. You gonna wear a hole in that seat staring over there? Cookie asked on the third night. Mike didn't look away from his drink. Didn't realize I was that obvious. You weren't, Cookie said. First night. Mike huffed quietly. She's not coming back? Cookie shrugged. She comes and goes. You might have hit a nerve. I wasn't aiming to. Doesn't mean you missed, Cookie said. Mike let that sit. Across the room, the laughter carried on as usual. Same arguments, same jokes, same exaggerated stories. Should have felt normal. Didn't. Not entirely. He didn't see her again until the weekend. Not at the VFW. At a local street fair. Mike hadn't planned on going. It wasn't really his scene. Crowds, vendors, music that was just loud enough to make conversation difficult. But one of his old buddies had dragged him along. Come on, Chief, the Marine had said. You've been hiding in that bar all week. I ain't hiding, Mike replied. You're definitely hiding. So he went. Halfway through the fair, weaving between food trucks and booths, selling everything from handmade signs to questionable jewelry, Mike caught sight of her. Amy stood near a stall selling kettle corn. Her weight shifted slightly to her left side, her shoulders tight in the way he recognized now. She wasn't miserable exactly, but she wasn't comfortable. Not even close. He watched for a moment. She took a step forward, adjusting her stance almost imperceptibly, like she was trying to stay balanced in a space that didn't quite cooperate with her anymore. People moved around her without noticing. Or worse, noticed and looked too long. Mike made his way over without thinking too hard about it. Didn't take you for a fair person, he said as he came up beside her. Amy turned, surprise flickering across her face before it settled into something more guarded. Didn't take you for one either, she replied. Friend dragged me, Mike said, nodding vaguely over his shoulder. Regretting most of my life choices right now. That earned a faint smirk. Same, she said. For a moment they just stood there watching the crowd move. You doing all right? Mike asked casually. Amy's eyes flicked toward him. Why wouldn't I be? He gestured lightly at the uneven ground, the packed crowd. Lot going on. She followed his glance, then shrugged. I've handled worse. I figured, Mike said. Still doesn't mean it's easy. She looked at him for a second longer than necessary. Then quietly, no, it doesn't. They walked together without really deciding to. Drift again. Past food stands and booths, through clusters of families and groups of kids running too fast for their own good. At one point, someone bumped into Amy's right side. Not hard, but enough. Her balance shifted sharply, her body reacting before her mind could. Mike's hand was there without hesitation. Brief, steady, not grabbing or pulling, just anchoring. She stiffened instantly, He let go just as quickly. Sorry, he said. Amy shook her head, regaining her footing. It's fine. There was a beat of silence. You can relax, she added quieter. I'm not going to fall apart. I know, Mike said. Then act like it. He glanced at her. That wasn't about thinking you'd fall apart. What was it about then? Reaction time, he said simply. She studied him, trying to decide if she believed that. You didn't hesitate, she said finally. Didn't need to. Another pause. This one stretched a little longer. You're not normal, she muttered. Mike let out a small breath of amusement. Been accused of that. They ended up sitting on a low stone wall near the edge of the fairground, a little removed from the main crowd. It was quieter there. Not silent, but manageable. Amy adjusted her leg slightly, stretching it out in front of her. You hate this kind of thing, Mike observed. Crowds? She said. Yeah. Because of the leg? The question wasn't gentle. It wasn't harsh either. Just direct. Amy didn't answer right away. I hate that it changes how people look at me, she said eventually. Like they're trying to figure out what happened without asking. They are, Mike said. Exactly. He nodded. So let them wonder. She shot him a look. That's your solution? It's part of it. And the other part. Mike leaned back on his hands, looking out over the crowd. You decide what it means, he said. Not them. Amy let out a quiet, humorless laugh. That sounds nice. It's not about nice, he replied. It's about control. I didn't have control, she snapped, the edge coming back. I know, he said evenly. Do you? She pressed. Because it doesn't feel like you do. Mike didn't flinch. No, he said. I don't know what that exact moment was like for you, but I know what it's like to have something ripped away without your say in it. That slowed her down. You chose to leave the Navy, she said. Yeah, he agreed. But I didn't choose everything I lost along the way. She looked at him more carefully now. What did you lose? Mike hesitated. Not because he didn't have an answer, because he did. My kids, he said finally. Not completely, but enough. Amy's expression shifted, less guarded, more understanding. That's not the same, she said quietly. No, Mike agreed. It's not. Another pause. But it still counts, he added. They sat there for a while, the tension from earlier softening into something quieter. Not resolved, but not sharp anymore either. You didn't come after me, Amy said suddenly. Mike glanced at her. After what? The other night, when I left. No, he said. Why not? He shrugged slightly. Didn't think you wanted me to. I didn't, she admitted. Then I made the right call. She studied him again. You always like that? Like what? Not chasing things. Mike thought about it. Depends on what it is, he said. And me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. They both noticed. Mike didn't answer right away. Then, calmly, you're not something to chase. Amy's breath caught slightly, not obvious. But there. What does that mean? She asked. It means if you want to be here, he said, meeting her gaze. You'll be here. And if I don't? Mike gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. Then you won't. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else he'd said. No pressure. No expectations. No attempt to pull her closer. Just space. Amy looked away, her jaw tightening slightly. That's frustrating, she muttered. Mike smirked faintly. Yeah, been told that. As the sun started to dip lower, the crowd began to thin. The noise softened. The sky shifted toward evening. Amy pushed herself up from the wall, adjusting her balance carefully but without hesitation. I should head out, she said. Mike stood as well. Yeah. They lingered for a second. You coming to the VFW? He asked. The question wasn't loaded. Just a question. Amy considered it. Maybe, she said. All right. Another pause. Then she glanced at him. You're still annoying, she added. Mike nodded. Consistent, if nothing else. A small smile tugged at her expression. Yeah, she said. You are. She turned to leave, then stopped. Hey, Mike. Yeah. She hesitated just for a moment. Next time. Don't wait so long to say hi. Mike raised an eyebrow. Thought you didn't like being chased. I don't, she said. But that doesn't mean you have to pretend I'm not there. He nodded once. Fair enough. Amy gave him one last look. Less guarded than before, but still cautious. Then she walked away. Mike watched her go, not chasing, not following. Just watching. For the first time, he felt like he understood something important. Not everything. Not even most things. But enough. This wasn't about fixing, or chasing, or forcing anything into place. It was about timing. And maybe, just maybe, they were starting to find it. Chapter 5, Collision Course. Amy didn't come back to the VFW the next night. Or the night after that. Mike didn't change his routine. He showed up, sat at the bar, traded the usual insults, and let the evening unfold the way it always did. If anyone noticed the empty booth in the back, they didn't comment on it out loud. Cookie did. You look like you're waiting on a delayed flight, he said. setting a fresh beer in front of Mike. I've waited on worse, Mike replied, not taking his eyes off the bottle. You gonna go find her? Cookie pressed. No. That stubborn or that patient? Mike lifted the bottle, took a drink, and set it back down. Depends on who's asking. Cookie snorted. Fair enough. But the truth of it sat deeper. Mike wasn't avoiding her. He was giving her space. There was a difference. At least, that's what he told himself. By the fourth day, it stopped feeling like patience and started feeling like avoidance, even if he hadn't chosen it. He found her anyway, not at the VFW, at a small outdoor range just outside of town. Mike had gone there out of habit more than anything else, checking the place out like he'd done with every range he'd visited after deployments, quietly, methodically, noting the setup, the safety protocols, the feel of it. He hadn't expected to see her standing in one of the lanes, but there she was, ear protection on, stance solid, focused. Her movements weren't hesitant. They were controlled, precise. Mike leaned against the wooden divider, watching for a minute without interrupting. She fired in steady intervals, her body absorbing the recoil without overcompensating. The prosthetic didn't slow her. It just changed the mechanics slightly. A shift in balance he recognized immediately. When she lowered the weapon and stepped back, he spoke. Not bad. Amy stiffened for a fraction of a second before pulling off her ear protection. You stalking me now? She asked, turning toward him. Mike pushed off the divider. Range is public. So is the rest of the town. Yeah, he said. But this is the first place I figured I'd find you again. That caught her off guard. Why? She asked. Because it's quiet, Mike said. And it gives you something to focus on without people staring. She studied him for a second, then glanced back at the target. Not wrong, she muttered. They stood side by side, not quite facing each other. You've been avoiding the VFW, Mike said. Yeah, Amy replied. No argument there? She shrugged. Didn't feel like dealing with it. With me, you mean? Amy didn't answer right away. Then, yeah. Mike nodded once. All right. The simplicity of it seemed to irritate her more than if he'd pushed. That's it? She asked. No follow-up questions? No calling me out on it. What's the point? He said. You just told me why. That usually doesn't stop people. I'm not most people, Mike replied. She let out a short breath, shaking her head. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. Amy turned fully toward him now. That's exactly the problem, she said. Mike raised an eyebrow. Is it? Yes, she snapped. You don't react the way people are supposed to. According to who? According to normal human interactions, she said, frustration spilling through now. If someone walks away from you, you follow. You ask questions. You push. You don't just stand there and act like it's fine. Mike crossed his arms slightly, his expression steady. It was fine, he said. That's not the point. Then what is the point? He asked, not raising his voice but sharpening slightly. Amy's jaw tightened. The point is, she trailed off, searching for it. The point is you don't seem to care. Mike stared at her for a long moment. Then he let out a slow breath. That's where you're wrong. Then show it, she fired back. Something in that landed. Not because of the words, but because of the expectation behind them. Mike unfolded his arms, stepping a little closer. I do care, he said, quieter now. That's why I didn't chase you. That makes no sense, Amy shot back. It does if you actually think about it, he said. You left because you needed space. Me running after you would have been about what I wanted, not what you needed. She blinked, momentarily thrown off by that. That's, she started, then stopped. It's not complicated, Mike continued. You don't solve everything by closing distance. Sometimes you solve it by not making it worse. Amy shook her head, but there was hesitation in it now. You're twisting things, she said. No, Mike replied. I'm just not playing the part you expect. And what part is that? She asked. The one where I try to fix you, he said. That hit exactly where he intended. Amy's expression hardened again. I never asked you to fix me. I know, Mike said. That's the problem. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You didn't ask, he said. But you're still testing me like I'm gonna try anyway. She scoffed, but there wasn't much force behind it. That's ridiculous. Is it? Mike asked. The silence stretched. Amy looked away first, exhaling sharply. Maybe, she admitted, just barely. They stood there, the tension still thick, but different now. Less explosive, more exposed. You don't get it, she said eventually, quieter now. Then explain it, Mike replied. Amy hesitated, then forced it out. People always try to help, she said. They think they're being supportive, but really they're just reminding me I'm different. Mike nodded once. Yeah. And it's exhausting, she added. Having to navigate that every time someone decides they need to make me feel better. I don't need to make you feel anything, Mike said. That stopped her again. I'm not here for that, he added. I'm here because I like talking to you. That's it. Amy searched his face, looking for a catch. What happens when that's not enough? She asked. Mike shrugged slightly. Then it isn't. That's your answer. It's the only honest one. She let out a breath, frustration bleeding into something else. Uncertainty, maybe. That's terrifying, she admitted. Mike gave a small nod. Yeah, it is. The air between them shifted again, subtle but real. Not tension gone, but tension understood. Amy turned back toward the range, staring at her target. Want to shoot? She asked suddenly. Mike blinked. You offering? Don't make it weird, she said. Wouldn't dream of it. He stepped into the lane beside her, checking the setup with practiced ease. Try not to show off, she added. Mike smirked faintly. No promises. They fell into a rhythm. Not competitive, just present. The sound of controlled fire cut through the quiet, grounding in a way words hadn't been able to. At one point, Amy glanced over. You're holding back, she said. Mike lowered the weapon slightly. Yeah. Why? He met her gaze. Because this isn't a contest. She nodded slowly. Good, she said. When they finally stepped away from the range, the sun was already starting to drop. Coming back to the VFW? Mike asked. Amy hesitated, then nodded once. Yeah, I think I am. Mike didn't smile, didn't make a big deal out of it. All right, he said. They started walking toward the parking lot. Side by side, not chasing, not pulling away, just moving forward. And for the first time since things had gone sideways, it felt like they were actually headed in the same direction. Chapter 6, Bearings Reclaimed. Amy didn't disappear this time. When she walked into the VFW 2 nights later, it wasn't hesitant, and it wasn't defensive. It was measured, like she'd made a decision ahead of time and wasn't interested in second-guessing it. Mike noticed her the second the door opened. He didn't turn immediately, didn't wave, didn't call out. Instead, he finished what he was saying to the Marine next to him. And that's exactly why you never let Marines plan logistics, Mike said, taking a drink. The Marine rolled his eyes. You just mad we get it done faster. Fast doesn't mean right, Mike shot back. Tell that to the objective. Tell it to the resupply you forgot, Mike replied. That earned a round of laughter. Only then did Mike glance over. Amy was already walking toward the bar. Evening, she said, stopping beside him. Evening, Mike answered, like it was the most normal thing in the world. No tension, no pause, just recognition. Cookie slid her a drink without asking. Nice to see you back. Yeah, Amy said, nodding slightly. Figured I'd stop avoiding things. Cookie smirked. Dangerous habit. Working on it, she replied. Mike pushed off the bar. You taking your table back? Or am I still squatting? Amy glanced toward the booth, then back at him. You can keep it, she said. I'm feeling generous. Appreciate that, Mike said. Hate to get evicted. She rolled her eyes slightly, but there was less edge in it than before. They moved together without discussing it. The booth felt different this time. Not because anything had changed physically, but because something between them had. There was less testing, less circling. Not none but less. You always this calm? Amy asked after a few minutes. Depends, Mike said. You always this suspicious? Yes, she replied immediately. Good, he said. Keeps things interesting. She took a sip of her drink, studying him over the rim of the glass. You didn't say I told you so, she said. About what? Me coming back. Mike shrugged slightly. Didn't feel necessary. Most people would have said something. Most people like being right more than they like being quiet, he said. Amy let out a quiet huff. That's true. A beat passed. You were right though, she added. About not chasing me. Mike leaned back slightly. You needed the space. Yeah, she said. I did. Another pause. And you didn't fill it, she continued. That mattered. Mike nodded once. Good. She tilted her head slightly. You really don't need credit for anything, do you? I know what I did, he said. That's enough. Amy stared at him for a second, then shook her head. You're frustrating, she said. Consistent feedback, Mike replied. The conversation flowed easier than it had before. Still direct, still blunt, but smoother. They drifted from topic to topic, less guarded, more open in the edges. You thought about what comes next? Amy asked. Every day, Mike said. Still don't have a clean answer. Same, she said. But I've been looking. Mike raised an eyebrow. At what? Amy hesitated. Then, adaptive sports programs, training stuff, maybe coaching. That fits, Mike said immediately. She blinked. You didn't even think about it. Didn't need to, he replied. You like control. You like function. That gives you both. She stared at him, caught off guard. Or I could be completely wrong, he added. No, she said slowly. You're not. That lingered. You ever think about something like that? She asked. Helping people? Mike snorted quietly. I spent 24 years telling people not to do stupid things. And how'd that go? Mixed results, he admitted. Amy smirked. You'd be good at it. Yeah, she said. You don't sugarcoat things. That's not always a strength. Depends on who you're talking to, she replied. At the bar, the usual crowd was picking up steam again. The Marine raised his voice from across the room. Hey Chief, you hiding back there now? Mike didn't turn. Just giving you space to say something intelligent. That's asking a lot, the Air Force colonel added dryly. Exceed expectations, Colonel, Mike called back. Amy shook her head. This is how you relax? She asked. Yeah, Mike said. Controlled chaos. Seems like just chaos. You get used to the flow, he replied. She watched the room for a moment. The overlapping conversations, the laughter, the rough-edged camaraderie. You belong here, she said. Mike considered that. Maybe, he said. Then he glanced at her. So do you. Amy shifted slightly, her gaze tightening. I'm not like them, she said. Neither am I, Mike replied. That gave her pause. You fit in differently, he added. Doesn't mean you don't fit. She sat with that, turning it over in her mind. You always look at things like that? She asked. Like what? Like there's another angle people aren't seeing. Mike shrugged. It's how you avoid getting blindsided. Or how you avoid dealing with things head-on, she countered. He smirked slightly. You're improving. Later in the evening, the crowd thinned just enough for the room to settle into something quieter. Amy rested her arm along the edge of the table, more relaxed now than Mike had seen her. You're different here than at the fair, she said. How so? Less watchful, she said. Mike nodded slightly. Familiar ground. That matters. Yeah, he said. Knowing where you stand. What to expect. Amy glanced down briefly at her prosthetic, then back up. I used to have that, she said. Mike didn't rush to fill the silence. Still do, he said after a moment. She frowned. Doesn't feel like it. It won't, he replied. Not yet. She studied him again. You say that like it's guaranteed. It's not, he admitted. But it's possible. Big difference. Yeah, he said. But possible's enough to work with. They lingered longer than either of them realized. The clock on the wall had drifted well past what either of them would have called early. I should go, Amy said eventually, though she didn't move right away. Yeah, Mike said. Another pause. Then she shifted, pushing herself up from the booth. Not rushed, not hesitant, just steady. Mike stood with her. You coming by tomorrow? He asked. Amy tilted her head, considering. Maybe not here, she said. Mike raised an eyebrow. There's a trail by the river, she added. Early. Less people. Mike nodded once. All right. She met his gaze. You don't have to say yes that fast, she said. I wasn't deciding, he replied. I was agreeing. That pulled a faint smile from her. Careful, she said. You're getting predictable again. Could be worse things. Yeah, she said. There could. They walked toward the door together. Not touching. Not pulling closer. But not holding distance either. Just aligned. As they stepped out into the night air, Amy glanced over at him. You know, she said. This might actually work. Mike looked at her, brow slightly raised. What might? She hesitated just long enough. This, whatever this is, she said. Mike gave a small nod. Yeah, he said. Might. For once, neither of them tried to define it. They didn't need to. Not yet. Chapter 7 Rough Seas. Steady course. The trail by the river was quieter than Mike expected. Not silent, nothing ever was, but calm in a way that didn't feel forced. The path stretched out under a canopy of trees, the water running steady alongside it, carrying its own rhythm without asking for attention. Mike arrived early. Old habits. He stood near the trailhead, hands in his jacket pockets, scanning the area without consciously doing it. Not for danger, those instincts had softened, but for awareness. Who was there, who was moving, what felt off? Nothing did. Still showing up ahead of schedule? Amy's voice came from behind him. Mike turned, a faint smirk tugging at his expression. Still noticing? She walked toward him, her stride even, deliberate. The uneven ground didn't slow her. Not anymore. Not like before. I figured you'd be here early, she said. You don't seem like the waiting type. I wait when it matters, he replied. Amy stopped a few feet in front of him, studying him for a moment. Yeah, she said. You do. There wasn't an edge to it. Just recognition. They started walking without ceremony. Side by side. Not rushing. Not dragging. The trail dipped and curved gently. The ground uneven enough to demand attention but not enough to make it difficult. For a while, neither of them spoke. It wasn't the same silence as before, the cautious kind. This one was steadier. Earned. You bring your kids out here? Amy asked eventually. Mike let out a quiet breath. Not yet, he said. Why not? He glanced down the path ahead. Still figuring that part out. They came to see you again? She asked. Yeah, he said. Had dinner a couple nights ago. And? Mike's jaw shifted slightly. Better than before. That doesn't sound convincing. It's not supposed to, he admitted. It's just true. Amy nodded slowly. That's fair. They kept walking. You talking to them about all of it? she asked. What, the past? Mike said. Yeah. He shook his head. Not all at once. You afraid of it? She pressed. Mike glanced at her. No. Then why hold back? He considered that. Because it's not just my conversation to have, he said. They've got their side of it too. Amy looked at him more carefully. You don't want to overwhelm them. No, he said. I don't want to rewrite things on my terms. That landed deeper than she expected. You really thought this through, she said. Had time, he replied. They reached a bend where the trail opened up slightly, the river stretching wider beside them. Amy slowed, adjusting her stance without stopping fully. Mike noticed, but he didn't comment. You can ask, she said. About what? He replied. My leg, she said, like it was obvious. Mike shook his head slightly. I can. Don't mean I need to. Most people do. I know, he said. That wasn't dismissive. It was understanding. Amy looked out over the water, her expression tightening just slightly. It still hurts sometimes, she said. Mike didn't respond immediately. Not like pain, she added. More like phantom stuff. Like it's still there, but it's not. I've heard of that, Mike said. Yeah, she muttered. It's annoying. That sounds like an understatement. She huffed a quiet laugh. It is. For a moment, the conversation felt almost normal. Then Amy's tone shifted. I tried one of those programs, she said suddenly. Mike glanced at her. Yeah. Adaptive training. Coaching. Everything I said I was thinking about. And, she shook her head. I left halfway through the second session. Mike didn't react. Just listened. They treated me like I was fragile, she said, frustration creeping back in. Like every step I took needed supervision. Like I might break if they took their eyes off me. You didn't like that. No, she said sharply. I hated it. Mike nodded once. Makes sense. Amy stopped walking. Mike stopped too, turning slightly toward her. It doesn't just make sense, she said. It pisses me off. I can tell. Because it's not me, she continued. That's not who I am. And they're trying to turn me into something smaller than I was. Mike held her gaze. You're letting them, he said. The words landed with weight. Amy's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You said they're treating you like that, Mike continued evenly. But you left. You walked away. Because they were wrong. Exactly, he said. So why are they still the ones defining it? She blinked, caught between frustration and something else. I'm not letting them define it, she argued. You are, Mike said, not unkindly. Because you walked out instead of taking it back. Amy stared at him, the tension rising again. That's not fair, she snapped. Mike didn't back off. No, he said. It's not. But it's true. The silence hit harder out here without the noise of the VFW to soften it. You really don't pull punches, she muttered. You don't need soft answers, he replied. And you decide that? She shot back. No, Mike said. You do. Every time you prove you can handle it. That slowed her down. Not stopped. Just shifted. Amy turned away, pacing a few steps before stopping again. You think this is easy? She asked, quieter now. No, Mike said. You think I can just walk back in there and take control like that? No, he said again. I think you can walk back in there and make it yours instead of theirs. She let out a frustrated breath. That sounds like the same thing. It's not, Mike replied. One's reacting, the other's deciding. Amy closed her eyes briefly, trying to sort through that. You're asking a lot, she said. I'm not asking anything, he replied. You brought it up. That hit. Not harsh, just honest. She opened her eyes, looking at him again. You always turn things like that, she said. Turn them how? Back on me, she said. Like I don't get to blame anything else. Mike exhaled slowly. You can blame whatever you want. And you won't. That's not my call, he said. She studied him, searching again for something, judgment, maybe. She didn't find it. Just steadiness. You're frustrating, she said again, softer this time. Mike gave a faint smirk. So I've heard. They started walking again, the tension easing just enough to move forward. I did go back, Amy said after a minute. Mike glanced at her. After I left the second time, she added. I didn't stay long. But I went. That matters, he said. Does it? Yeah, Mike replied. You didn't quit. She looked down at the trail. Felt like I did. Difference between leaving and quitting, he said. One's temporary. And the other? Final. Amy nodded slowly. I don't want it to be final, she said. Then it's not, Mike replied. Simple. Direct. Infuriatingly steady. Amy exhaled, shaking her head slightly. You make things sound simple. They are simple, he said. They're not easy. No, he agreed. They're not. As they reached the end of the trail loop, the parking lot came back into view. Neither of them stopped right away. But the space between steps started to feel shorter. We're doing it again, Amy said. Doing what? Mike asked. Getting stuck in the heavy stuff, she said. Mike considered that. You want to shift it? he asked. Yes, she said immediately. All right. He nodded toward her leg. So when are you going to admit you've got a better stride than half the guys I served with? Amy blinked, then laughed. Not restrained, not cautious. Real. That's your shift, she said. Effective though, Mike replied. It is, she admitted. They reached the edge of the lot, slowing naturally. You're not wrong, she added. I've been working on it. Shows. She met his gaze, the tension from earlier replaced with something steadier. You don't let things sit unresolved, do you? She asked. Mike shook his head. Waste of time. Yeah, she said quietly. It is. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to leave. I can go back, Amy said suddenly. To that program. I can do it differently. Mike nodded once. Yeah, you can. You're not going to tell me what to do? She asked. No, he said. Why not? Because you already know, he replied. That settled something. Not everything, but enough. Amy took a small step back, adjusting her stance. You coming by the VFW tonight? She asked. Yeah, Mike said. Good, she replied. She turned, heading toward her car, then paused, glancing back over her shoulder. Try not to start a fight without me, she added. Mike smirked. No promises. Amy shook her head, but she was smiling. As Mike watched her go, he recognized the feeling settling in his chest. Not calm, not certainty, but direction, like catching a steady current after too long drifting. It wasn't smooth sailing. It wasn't supposed to be, but it was forward. And for the first time in a long time, that was exactly enough. Chapter 8 New Bearings. The VFW felt warmer that night. Not physically. Nothing had changed about the worn wood floors or the old bar. But the energy carried something different. Quieter in the right ways. Louder in the ones that mattered. Mike noticed it the second he walked in. Look who decided to grace us, the Marine called out from his usual spot. Mike didn't break stride. Figured I'd come see if you'd learned anything since last time. Unlikely, the Air Force colonel added dryly from across the room. Amy was already there. Not at the back booth, at the bar. She stood with one arm resting against the counter, talking to Cookie like she'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. Mike slowed just slightly, watching the shift. She looked settled. Not finished. Not complete. But grounded in a way she hadn't been before. That's new, he said as he came up beside her. Amy glanced over, a faint smile touching her expression. What is this? He said, gesturing lightly. Bar instead of the bunker. She huffed a quiet laugh. Felt like mixing it up. Bold move, Mike replied. Cookie slid a beer in front of him. She's been here an hour already. Mike raised an eyebrow. That's so? Amy shrugged. Got here early. Mike tilted his head slightly. Sounds familiar. Don't get used to it, she said. Wouldn't dream of it. They didn't retreat to the booth this time. They stayed at the bar. Part of the noise instead of apart from it. You finally join in the rest of us? The Marine asked Amy with a grin. She looked him up and down. That depends. You always this loud? Only when it's necessary. It's never necessary, she replied evenly. The colonel smirked into his drink. Careful, Mike muttered, leaning slightly closer to her. They'll adopt you if you're not careful. Terrifying thought, Amy said. Too late, Cookie added. You're already in. Amy rolled her eyes, but she didn't push back, didn't withdraw. The conversation rolled around them in familiar waves. Jabs, stories, debates that didn't really matter except that they did. You hear about Johnson? Someone said. The one who thought he could outdrink a Marine? Mike asked. Yeah. Bad decision, Mike said. Terrible execution, the Marine added. Amy leaned slightly into the counter, watching the back and forth. You miss it, she said quietly to Mike. He glanced at her. Parts of it. Like this. Yeah, he admitted. Like this. She nodded once. I think I get it now, she said. What? Why you keep coming back here? Mike took a drink, considering. Feels like something steady, she added. Even if everything else shifts. Exactly, Mike said. Amy looked around the room again, then back at him. You were right, she said. Mike raised an eyebrow. I'm gonna need more detail than that. About fitting, she said. About it not being the same for everyone. He held her gaze for a moment. Yeah, he said quietly. You found your angle. Something like that. Later in the evening, the crowd thinned into smaller conversations. Amy leaned back slightly, her posture relaxed. I went back, she said. Mike didn't need clarification. To the program, she added anyway. He nodded. Figured you might. She studied him. You're not going to ask how it went? I will if you want me to. Amy huffed softly. It was different this time. Yeah, she said. I didn't let them set the pace. I did. And they adjusted, she said, a trace of satisfaction in her voice. Turns out they weren't the problem. I was. Mike smirked slightly. Told you. She rolled her eyes. Don't ruin it. Wouldn't dare. She shook her head, but the edge was gone. I stayed the whole session, she added. That's solid. It felt. She paused, searching for the word. Right. Not easy, but right. Mike nodded once. That's how you know it's yours. Amy looked at him for a moment longer. You make it sound like you've done this before. He considered that. Maybe I have, he said. With your kids? She asked. Mike's expression shifted slightly, not closing, just grounding. Yeah, he said. Still doing it. And, still figuring it out, he admitted. Amy nodded slowly. You will. Mike glanced at her. You sound sure. I am, she said. You don't quit. He let out a small breath. Neither do you. Working on it, she said. The night carried on easy after that. No sharp edges. No collisions. Just movement. At one point, the Marine raised his glass. To the chief, he said. For finally retiring. Mike shook his head. You act like I didn't earn it. You did, the Marine said. We're just glad you survived it. Barely, Mike muttered. Laughter followed. And to Amy, Cookie added, raising his own glass, for sticking around long enough to become one of us. Amy blinked, caught off guard. Careful, she said. That sounds like a commitment. It is, Cookie replied. She glanced around at the faces, at the familiarity settling into something real. Then she lifted her glass. All right, she said. I can live with that. They clinked glasses. The sound was small, but it carried. Later, outside, the night settled cool and quiet around them. Mike and Amy stood near the entrance, neither in a hurry to leave. You didn't try to define it, Amy said. Mike frowned slightly. Define what? This? She said, gesturing lightly between them. Mike considered that. No, he said. Didn't see the need. Most people would've. Most people rush, he replied. Amy nodded slowly. I don't want to rush, she said. Good, Mike said. Me neither. A quiet moment passed. Not empty, just steady. You know, Amy added, her tone softer now. This feels different than anything I expected. Mike glanced at her. In a bad way? She shook her head. No, in a way that actually works. He let that sit. Yeah, he said. It does. Amy looked out toward the street, then back at him. Where does it go from here? She asked. Mike didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't have one. Because he didn't need to rush it. Forward, he said finally. Amy smiled faintly. That's not very specific. It's not supposed to be, he replied. She studied him, then nodded. All right, she said. Forward, then. Mike gave a small nod. Forward. They stood there a moment longer. Then, without ceremony, without hesitation, they started walking. Not in lockstep. Not pulling or pushing. Just moving the same direction. And this time, neither of them wondered if they were supposed to. They just knew. Epilogue, 1 year later, the booth wasn't theirs. Not officially. No name on it. No reservation. No rule that said anyone else couldn't slide in and take it if they got there first. But after a year, nobody did. That part had settled without discussion. Like most things that mattered. Mike leaned back in the seat. One arm stretched along the top edge of the booth, watching the familiar rhythm of the VFW unfold around him. Same bar. Same arguments. Same laugh that cut through the noise like clockwork. Different man. That part hadn't been gradual. It had just happened. You're staring again, Amy said, nudging his boot lightly under the table. Mike blinked, pulling back from wherever his thoughts had drifted. Wasn't staring. You always say that, she replied, raising an eyebrow. Because it keeps being true, he said, deadpan. Amy huffed a quiet laugh, shifting slightly on the seat. She didn't hide her leg anymore. Not that she ever really had, but there was a difference now. It was part of her space, not something she adjusted around. Mike noticed without commenting. He'd learned that balance. You're doing that thing again, she added. What thing? Where you're thinking about something you're not saying out loud. Mike smirked faintly. You've gotten better at that. You've gotten easier to read, she shot back. That's debatable. Not really, she said. It had been a year of small shifts. Not dramatic change. Not sweeping transformation. Just steady movement. Amy had gone back to the program and stayed. Not because it got easier, but because she didn't let it push her out anymore. She'd taken control of it the way Mike had said, and somehow it had stuck. Now she coached part-time. Still direct. Still blunt. Mike had seen it once. Stood off to the side while she corrected someone's stance with the same sharp honesty she used on him. You're not balancing wrong because of your leg, she had told the guy. You're balancing wrong because you're overthinking it. Mike had nearly laughed out loud. She'd shot him a look that said don't you dare. He hadn't. Mostly. And Mike, he was still figuring things out. With his kids. With himself. But he was present now. That was the difference. Not perfect. Not caught up. But present. Hey, Chief. The Marine's voice cut across the room again. Mike didn't even turn. You ever try thinking before speaking? That sounds exhausting. The Marine shot back. It is, the Colonel added dryly. That's why he doesn't do it. Amy smirked, watching the exchange. You ever get tired of that? she asked. Of them. Mike shrugged. No. Why not? Because it stays the same in the right ways, he said. Amy tilted her head slightly. That matters more than things changing? Sometimes, Mike replied. Sometimes you need something that doesn't move while everything else does. She nodded slowly. I think I get that, she said. Mike glanced at her. Yeah, she said. Took me a minute. He gave a small nod. Worth the wait. Amy went quiet after that. Not withdrawn. Just thinking. Mike recognized the shift immediately. You all right? He asked. Yeah, she said. Though her tone was softer than usual, that was enough to get his attention. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. What's on your mind? Amy hesitated. That was new. Not the hesitation itself, she'd had plenty of that, but the way it sat now. Less defensive. More weight. I've been trying to figure out how to say this, she admitted. Mike didn't rush her. Didn't fill the silence. Just waited. She drew a slow breath. You know how we talked about second chances? She said. Yeah, Mike replied. Amy met his gaze. This is one. Something in her tone shifted the room, even if no one else noticed it yet. Mike's expression sharpened slightly, not tense, just focused. All right, he said. Talk to me. Amy's fingers tapped once against the edge of the table, then stilled. I didn't think this was something I'd ever get, she said quietly. That's a broad statement, Mike replied. You're gonna have to narrow it down a little. She let out a small, nervous huff. Yeah, okay. Another breath. Then she said it. I'm pregnant. The words landed clean, uncomplicated, heavy in all the right ways. Amy didn't look away. She held his gaze, steady on the surface, but there was tension there. Anticipation. A reflex she hadn't been able to shake. Fear. Not of the situation, but of the reaction. Mike didn't speak right away. Amy's shoulders tightened just slightly. There it was. The pause. The space where things could go wrong. She braced for it, the concern, the hesitation, the questions. She didn't expect the way his expression changed. Slowly, not sudden, not forced. A genuine smile began to form, spreading across his face like something unfolding naturally. Amy blinked, caught off guard. What? She asked, her voice quieter than she meant it to be. Mike didn't answer right away. He stood. Amy's breath hitched slightly. She wasn't sure what he was about to do, until he stepped around the table and pulled her into his arms. Firm, grounded, certain. Her body reacted before her mind caught up, her hands pressing lightly against his chest like she was trying to confirm he was actually there. You're smiling, she said, disbelief threading through the words. Yeah, Mike murmured. That's not what I expected. Then you've been underestimating me, he said quietly. She let out a shaky breath, her grip tightening slightly against him. I thought you'd... Stop, Mike said softly. She stilled. He leaned down just enough for his voice to drop close to her ear. We're both being given a second chance, he said. For a new future. Amy's breath caught. The words hit deeper than the moment. And I want to take it, he added, his voice steady, certain. With you. Her eyes closed briefly. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Just clarity. Mike pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands still resting solidly at her sides. There was no hesitation. Marry me. Not planned. Not rehearsed. Just true. Amy stared at him. For half a second. That was all it took. Yes. No pause. No doubt. Just an answer. The booth exploded. Hey, what the hell's going on over there? The Marine shouted, standing halfway up. Cookie leaned over the bar, squinting. You gonna share? Or just keep hugging where we can't hear it? Mike glanced over his shoulder, one arm still around Amy. She said yes. The room froze for exactly 1 second. Then, and oh way, about time. You didn't even buy a ring? The noise crashed in all at once. Cookie was already grabbing a bottle from behind the bar. That's a round on the house. Don't argue with me, Chief. Amy laughed, really laughed, her head tilting back slightly as the chaos swelled around them. Mike looked down at her, that same steady smile still there. You good with this? He asked quietly. Amy met his gaze, her expression clear. Yeah, she said. I am. She hesitated just a fraction, then added, softer this time. We are. Mike nodded once. Yeah, he said. We are. Around them, the celebration kept building, loud, unfiltered, exactly the way it should be. And for once, neither of them stood outside of it. They were right in the middle of it. Not lost, not unsure, just there, together, and moving forward.